Hello, my name is David Machles. I want to start by thanking you uh, for inviting me to share my stories and experiences with you regarding the 16 guidelines and how we've used them. My wife, I live here in Raleigh, North Carolina, in the USA, and my wife, who's also a 16 guideline facilitator, is also my business partner. And the two of us, we have a small consulting firm. We're focused on workplace and employee safety, well-being, and what we call organizational well-being. We have undergraduate degrees in nursing. We both have masters in public health and our doctorates in adult education. And as we got into organizational learning and adult education, we kind of quickly realized, even though we recognized it early on in our career, it became a little bit more apparent that a lot of what we would call a toxic culture or difficulties that the cultures at work were all based on issues pretty much surrounding incivility, a lot of which is brought about by management or leadership often. So that was something that we were kind of focused on now, especially as we were trying to implement different programs in the workplaces. Uh, we heard in 2000, I think it's probably around 2007, we're both members of the Kadampa Center as the FPMT Center here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And one of our co-members and a friend of ours, Denise Flora, had begun doing some work in 16 guidelines and developed a program. And we were unfamiliar with the 16 guidelines at the time, but she developed this program called Ready, Set, Happy, where she incorporated these 16 guidelines into the children's program at the Gadampa Center. And she was giving a talk or presentation one day, and Karen and I listened, thought we'd stop and listen to it. And we were really amazed, even though at the time we thought this was a kids program, a children's program. We saw, oh, there's a lot of applicability here to adults. I guess we hadn't realized that there was an adult program already, the 16 guideline program. We listened to Denise talk about, teaching humility, patience, contentment, and delight, for example. And, the things we were struggling with in the workplace for our clients was arrogance, anger, greed, and jealousy. So the opposite, the things that these guidelines would kind of get at. So I went to Canada in 2008 to find out more. It was a 16 guideline workshop there. And at the time, they didn't have different levels of facilitators. You're just a 16 guideline facilitator. So I signed up for this and went, and it was taught by Decky Lee and Allison Murdoch were both the instructors there. And I came away and really impressed. We came away from that. Came back. Uh, Karen and I talked and worked about it, worked through it a little bit, and developed a program that we could incorporate some of these concepts into the workplace. We had a client that had wanted to do Myers-Briggs type indicator, and I'm certified to do that. And they asked if we could do it, and we tried to dig a little deeper, find out, why you want to do the Myers-Briggs. And they were having some issues where middle management and upper management, um, they just needed some guidance. I guess they were kind of grabbing at things, and they thought Myers-Briggs might help people understand themselves a little bit better. Uh, so what we proposed to them was to do the Myers-Briggs, but rather than just do it to find out, what's my view of the world and how do I interact with the world, but to help them understand that there's 15 other ways of interacting with the world, and how do I interact with those other 15 ways, and why do they see things different? Why is my framework like it is? And more importantly, why understand everybody else's framework as well. So that was kind of the 16 guidelines became the goal, but the Myers-Briggs was kind of the foundation that we used in that. And that went quite well. We spent a couple hours working on a Myers-Briggs, and then the rest of the 2-day workshop was all geared around the 16 guidelines. We kept it very secular. even though, I had somebody come up at break and say, is this Buddhist? He said, well, there's some Eastern thought here that's kind of wrapped into it, but we knew we had to kind of keep it secular, which we did. And they ended up setting up, I think, 5 workshops, and we ended up with a lot of folks coming to those. Now, since then, the company's been bought by the company, which happens, and old things get thrown away, and they have new ways of doing things and everything else. But having been out there not too long ago, we still see we had provided them the 16 guideline cards, and we had a little pre-framing right at the beginning of they're sitting in conference rooms at the beginning of a meeting. Pick a card and say, all right, let's all try to use this guideline during this meeting or whatever. But some of those cards are still out there floating around at that organization. And we've done that at a couple other places as well, too. So that's one area that we've kind of used the 16 guidelines in our work in organizations. Around the same time, this was again around in 2008 or so, I had been volunteering to do prison work through Liberation Prison Project, LPP, which is FPMT's program. And I was working in an adult male medium security prison. And most of the inmates were, the prisoners were, middle-aged men, older men even, that were really interested in anger management. So we were using meditation as kind of a foundation for anger management, and incorporating the 16 guidelines. I began incorporating that, and that went over quite well too. And they really appreciated how we were able to kind of help them through using the 16 guidelines. And I was interested at the time of starting to work we have some youth prisons here in the United States. Usually teenagers, a lot of boys, a lot of gang members, kids that have gotten delinquency issues and are incarcerated. They call them developmental centers. And I was interested in working at a youth facility that's closer to my home. And I even asked one of the adult prisoners, I was going to go work at a youth facility, if they had any advice, and they said, good luck. I think that it was recognized that a 55-year-old gentleman that was incarcerated was realizing that they had kind of messed up their lives a little bit, maybe made some wrong choices. He said, and you find out quickly that a 16-year-old boy doesn't necessarily have that same perspective. So we knew it was going to be a challenge going into it. But I met with the chaplain who was setting up the programs, and I talked to her about doing the 16 guidelines, and she was fascinated by it, and thought it'd be wonderful. We didn't want to do a meditation class. This was something that they were going to select students to attend. So the counseling staff, the psychiatrists and sociologists and psychologists, made the decision on who they thought was good candidates for the class, and they recognized some kids wouldn't be good candidates. So they picked folks, but yet they could opt not to go. And so we wanted to give it a name that would resonate with the teenagers. Meditation, anger management, ready, set, happy wasn't going to cut it. So we came up with Building Inner Strength. This was in 2010, and it was a 10-week program based on the 16 guidelines. And we covered the introductory class, kind of was an introduction to mindfulness, watch your thoughts, watch your breathing. And then we would cover roughly 2 guidelines a week in these 1.5, 2-hour classes that we had with the kids. And we'd start out with maybe 10 students in a class. And by the time we finished at the end of the 10 weeks or so, we might have 4 left or something. Because a lot of them just, it wasn't something they were interested in, or they weren't, they had the choice of coming to our class or playing video games. It was just kind of their free time, and most of them made the choice to play video games. But we did have some successes, and I was really thrilled with some of the stories, some of the successes we had. We had a student that was being prepared to be released. They were only there for maybe 5 6 months in total, and he was getting ready to get released. And usually, just prior to release, some of the other students would try to antagonize him, to make them do something that would extend their incarceration, which is probably typical of teenage boys. If I can get this kid in detention and not impact me, I'll try to do that. Um, so so he knew his release time was coming up, and he knew that he was going to be confronted with other kids, which is kind of standard. And we said, well, let's try this. Try not to get engaged. Try to just hold your tongue, and hold your, be mindful of what you say, and don't allow yourself to get pulled in. Just let it go. Just let it go. And we spent a lot of time talking about that. And so the following week when I went there, he said he was in the break room, in the television room, during their downtime, during their free time, and some of the other kids started to antagonize him. He said, and I imagined them having my remote control, like a television remote control, and I decided that I was going to take my remote control back. He said, I just made this picture of me taking my remote control back and not letting him work on me anymore. And he said it worked, because I didn't get into trouble like I anticipated. So he found a skill that just not engaging helped them out tremendously. So he was real impressed with that, and I was excited with that story that he told us. Um, we had a Muslim gentleman in there, young boy in there, and he was allowed to attend because every other program at the facility was Christian, and his mother didn't want him going to a Christian one, but she wanted him to come to this one because it was secular as far as she's concerned, and she liked the morals and the virtues that were being taught. So that was refreshing too. And in a third story, I'll tell you real quickly here. We had another student that was always it was kind of a mutual antagonistic situation with one of the guards, one of the counselors, I guess they called them, and they would run into each other throughout the week on campus somewhere, going from one class to another, or in the cafeteria. And there was always confrontation, and usually he had a few words and the guard had a few words, and they kind of were always on each other a little bit. And I said, you're here's an opportunity to kind of pre-frame, choose not to engage with that person, and show some humility and patience, and just kind of don't engage with them, and let's see how it goes. And you have nothing to lose, right? You're going to confront this person, this guard, 3 times a week, and when and where, and just play with it. It's an opportunity to experiment. And so he reluctantly agreed, and I didn't know if it was going to work. But the following week, he said, I did it. I did not say something to her, and it went fine. It was no problem with it. And slowly, then we began working with some of the other guidelines, and you said, say something nice. Start, try to be a little friendlier or something. So gradually, over the period of the time, he developed a relationship with this guard, and they got to be relatively close. And so he just thought that was spectacular, that he could control his mind like that and change his interaction. So he got to see how we think and how we act and how we relate, kind of in living. So it gave him an opportunity, and that was again something real we felt pretty good about. So I thought I just wanted to share a few stories with you here today. I appreciate the opportunity to do that, and I hope you find that your work here during your workshop is meaningful and is beneficial. So again, thank you and take care.